Hi, this is Brass Check, and we're going over hurricanes and fatalities from hurricanes today because no one else seems to be covering it. You may remember that there was a hurricane, Category 3, that passed over New Orleans in 2005, and approximately 1,500 people plus were killed. Keep that number in mind. 1,500 people plus were killed immediately. And those that died a few days later or a few weeks later, nobody's really counted that. But the death toll is a minimum of 1,500. Okay, how many people died from the hurricane in Houston, in the Houston area? Last number I saw was 31. How many people died in Florida from the hurricane, the significant, massive hurricane that passed over that area? Last number I saw was 22. How many people died in the Caribbean, which got hit with Category 5 storms, full bore? Last number I saw, and I know this has got to be low, but it's all I've got right now, 14. So let's look at these comparative numbers. 31 in Houston, 22 in Florida, 14 in the Caribbean. 1,500 plus people died in New Orleans alone as a result of a Category hurricane. Nobody's talking about this. This is a wide, vast, massive discrepancy. What happened? Well, as usual, the news media is giving out very poor information. I saw a headline from the LA Times that says, basically, thank meteorologists for the lack of fatalities in the recent hurricanes. I like meteorologists. They're one of the last uncorrupted professions in America. They actually try to do their job honestly. It's hard to bribe a meteorologist. What would you bribe them with? Why would you bribe them? What would you bribe them for? So meteorologists are good guys. But the idea that they're responsible for the enormous discrepancy in deaths from hurricane fatalities is erroneous and false. And I wonder who planted that story. I wonder if it could have been the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And you might say, well, what do they have to do with hurricane deaths? Very simply, the deaths in New Orleans were not caused by the storm. The storm was an annoyance. The storm tore some shingles off roofs, created some damage, no doubt. The deaths were caused by flooding. And the flooding, which they showed you on the news media even back in 2005, the flooding appeared to be this gradual, steady, slow thing. You saw water coming down Canal Street, and people were going, well, where's this coming from? What they didn't show you, because they couldn't show you at the time, and because what they later suppressed, is that the people who died in New Orleans, all 1,500 of them, died instantly from massive, catastrophic engineering failure of the levee system designed, built, and maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The levee system in New Orleans failed in over 50 places. Some of the places it failed truly catastrophically. One of the places, well-known, famous, the Lower Ninth Ward. Lower Ninth Ward is not below sea level. However, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built and maintained a sort of a canal separating Lower Ninth from the other parts of the city. And they put up a wall to hold back the water. And instead of building that wall properly, they built it improperly and carelessly. And even though the storm wasn't a big deal, the surge, the tidal surge, was pretty big. And it created a lot of pressure on that wall. And that wall just fell over. And when it did, about 15 feet high, maybe more, of water, tons and tons and tons of water, hit the Lower Nine like a atomic bomb, basically. And some people listening to this call may have seen the aftermath. They may have seen houses picked up and put on top of other houses. And houses just scraped away completely. There were some other neighborhoods in New Orleans that suffered similar fates. The storm had come. The storm had gone. It created a little bit of damage. It created no fatalities. What created the fatalities was the failure of the levee system. So if you were sitting at home thinking in Lower Nine or in some other neighborhoods thinking, wow, we dodged that bullet, 1 second, the next second you got hit by a wall of water and you probably died due to blunt trauma first, if you were lucky, if not massive injury and then drowning. Gruesome, but that's what happened. And it's amazing to me, A, that most people don't know this, and B, here we have this vast discrepancy of fatalities, and no one in our mainstream media is pointing out the facts of history. And the few news outlets that I've seen that have commented on it credit meteorologists. And hey, no, I don't want to take anything away from meteorologists. Credit FEMA. Yeah, right. Thanks, FEMA. And credit officials. Credit all this nonsense. No. What happened was the bayous south of New Orleans were carved up by the oil industry, never repaired the way they were supposed to. So the natural flood protection, which was 100 miles deep, is pretty much gone. So that was part one. Part two, in order to keep the Mississippi free for navigation, an important thing, since about a third of the nation's industrial, economic farm output comes through New Orleans. They've dug all kinds of canals, built all kinds of walls, done all kinds of engineering, which is fine. The problem is they didn't do it correctly. Now, the second problem is they lied about it. While people were still drowning, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had their spin masters all over the media spinning baloney. And that's a polite word about what happened and what really happened. They knew what happened. They're well aware of what happened. They saw the failed levees from the air as soon as aircraft and helicopters were able to get in the air. They knew it happened. And they knew they were responsible. They knew that their designs and their construction and their maintenance was insufficient. But they started to spin. And they were responsible. You may have heard this thing that was going around in 2005. Oh, those people in New Orleans, they live under seawater. They're reckless. They didn't leave when they should have. They got what they deserved. There were people saying that. There were U.S. politicians in the Congress saying that. There was also a lot of that on the internet on discussion boards. And you don't know this unless you're a really careful, long-time reader of Brass Check, but those discussion board comments came directly from the office of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers New Orleans office. And that was proven, and the head of that office apologized publicly for it. But just so you understand this, while New Orleans was flooded, while people were drowning, while people were starving and going without water on TV, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was spinning the media and also had employees on their computers acting as sock puppets, posing as regular Americans and inserting these vicious, negative, untruthful comments about New Orleans and about what happened in New Orleans. So I'm thankful that the number of fatalities in Texas and Florida and the Caribbean were not as great as they were in New Orleans. But we need to remember, first of all, we need to know, and then we need to remember why so many people died in New Orleans and the cover-up that took place while people were literally still drowning, and the cover-up that went on for months and months. If you want to learn more about this and be part of the movement to get these facts out, I recommend that you go to levees.org, levees.org, and you may say, well, I don't live in New Orleans and levees don't really affect me. You may be surprised. There are U.S. Army Corps of Engineer levees everywhere in the country, and a lot of big cities like Washington, D.C., for example, which are kind of low, close to sea level, depend on those levees. There's also a levee system in Sacramento Delta that keeps the Pacific Ocean, the water from the Pacific Ocean, from getting into the Central Valley of California, which is where, last I checked, 80% of our green grocery stuff comes from. If those levees fail, the Central Valley of California will be filled with salt water. And that is not something that can be remedied in our lifetimes, if ever. So these levees are very important. You pay for them. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has such a big budget that they actually appear as a small slice on the pie of the federal budget. If you see a really big federal budget and you see it in a circular form with slices, one of those slices is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They handle a lot of money. They are not known for their integrity. In the New Orleans case, could they have behaved more criminally? So anyway, if you want to know more about this kind of thing and you want to see if there are levees in your area that you depend on that are run by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and you want to agitate in a positive way on making sure that this branch of the government does what it's supposed to do, go to levees.org, levees.org. And that's Brass Check.